Good afternoon, Facebook friends. I hope you had a great weekend. Here we are kicking off the week on Monday as my state of Florida begins to reopen. You can actually go to the beach today, but I'm not quite there. Going to brave those big, what I anticipate will be huge crowds. So I'm gonna wait a little bit before I hit the beach. But it's good to hear that things are finally starting to open up. Today I want to talk about comments from Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, who said there's, quote, enormous evidence that COVID-19 emerged from a lab. Secretary Pompeo says, I can tell you that there's a significant amount of evidence that this came from a laboratory in Wuhan, Pompeo said when he appeared on ABC's This Week. And he says, when pressed for what evidence he had, he says, quote, I'm not allowed to tell you that. Now, these follow comments from President Trump, who said, referring to China, I think they made a horrible mistake and that they don't want to admit it. This was an appearance on Fox News. And he said, we're going to be giving a very strong report as to exactly what we think happened. And he says, I think it will be very conclusive. Came out just a day or two ago, I believe, that Trump had directed the Office of the Director of National Intelligence to investigate the origins of COVID-19. And the response from the Chinese state media, state newspaper, says that they demand evidence from the Secretary of State, calling him basically, a scourge of humanity for enlisting all this propaganda against the Chinese, and says that they are bluffing. Now, the U.S. mainstream media, if you've been following this story, has been calling this a conspiracy theory, the idea that that the virus may have been leaked out of a lab or intentionally released. All this, anything other than the virus coming from a wet market, has been labeled a conspiracy theory since March. And this goes back to, if you can remember, going back to Senator Tom Cotton, who suggested that the virus may have leaked out of a lab. They were all over him. And it really makes you wonder why. I mean, to me, it's perfectly reasonable, and I think many of you agree as well, that it's perfectly reasonable that out of this huge virology lab in Wuhan, where they're working on things like the COVID-19 virus, that it may have just, not saying intentional, we don't even have to go there, but just at minimum may have leaked out of that lab, because that wet market, where they say, is like just a couple of blocks from the lab, and here we have this global pandemic originating right from that very spot. So it's, for some reason, they just refuse to entertain this theory. I'm referring to the mainstream media, and all that pushback makes me a little suspicious, to be honest, that they would just dismiss this and call this a crazy, wild conspiracy theory, when I think just as you and myself, we think that's entirely reasonable. So some of you have commented on this. Dorothy Moreau says, perhaps the truth may eventually come out. Frank Howard says, sounds to me like Pompeo is advocating for war, and this goofy effer graduated from West Point, top of his class. Go figure. So Frank thinks this is a push for war. I don't think so, Frank. I think we're just trying to get to the bottom of it. Although these words are getting heated, I don't think we're going that far. Karina Shaver says, if it came from a lab, they were playing God with it. Tariff them to oblivion. You feed them as if that's the rules. Yet, I agree, Korea. Tariff the oblivion out of them. We've heard stories of make China pay. What do you do about it? And some people want their states to sue, and I don't think that's the answer. I don't think it's going to work. Suing's not going to work. I say economic pain with tariffs. Just ratchet it up. That's how you do this. Randy Carr says the term man-made is subjective. They're taking a natural origin viruses and subjecting them to, quote, gain-of-function experiments in order to mutate them to infect human tissue. This is not the same as bioengineering, gene splicing, man-made. This is a game of words. The virus had human help. Now, that's interesting, because one of the things that Pompeo was pressed on was whether or not this thing is man-made or not. And I guess it is a game of words, as Randy says, and Randy kind of explains here. I mean, I guess anytime I guess what he's saying is they didn't make it like out of whole cloth. It could have come from as we've heard, maybe you get it from a bat out in the wild. You get a sample of a virus the natural virus that the bat is carrying, and then you might do a couple of things to it. And that's okay. I mean, it's clearly very dangerous. But that's not the same as saying this was made as like a bioweapon or something like that. And I don't know if that's maybe what the mainstream media is so reluctant, because they don't want you to go down that. Because that's not what we're saying, though. We're just saying maybe a worker they didn't follow the right safety protocols or whatever, and it was an accidental leak. What's the problem with that? I don't know. I'd love to know what you think about this. And these comments from Secretary Pompeo. I mean, is this just a war of words, or is there more evidence coming out? The president seemed to think or hinted that there is going to be a report detailing and kind of blaming China, or at least finding the origin of this virus coming out of this lab. So I'd love to know what you think about that. Is you think we can expect to hear we're going to see some big major evidence drop in the next few days that's finally going to settle this question? Go ahead and comment down below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you tomorrow afternoon at 1.